This episode of Pool Magazine podcast is proudly sponsored by Ledge Lounger, the leaders in outdoor living and in-pool furniture. Ledge Lounger believes outdoor living inspires life's most meaningful moments, which is exemplified in their new collection, Autograph. Want to learn more about the Autograph collection? Check out what's new and visit our website at ledgeloungers.com.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast. Today I'm chatting with Erik Eikevik of Ike's Carter Pools, a third-generation pool company and near permanent fixture in the South Florida area for over 70 years. They've been crafting one-of-a-kind outdoor living spaces for homeowners, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show, Erik.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, before we get real deep into our conversation, I was hoping we could start off by having you give us a little bit about a bio about who you are, how you got started in the pool industry, and what Ike's Carter Pools is all about.
Sure. So I'm pretty young, but it started, 41, but it started a long, long time ago. As you said, a third generation company. My grandfather started it, started in the company back in the early 50s. Company was established in 1949, but I basically, my dad worked in the business and that's basically the same thing that I did. I grew up working in the business, and the first pool that I ever was on, I think I was, 8 years old. My dad brought me to work, and back then it was my business partner now, and there's two of us, me and my business partner, Gary Kaplan, and I think Gary must have been, 19 or something like that. And he was doing fire ups on pools, and my dad brought me to work and said, "Hey, Gary, take my son with you. I got a lot going on." And just remember carrying like a net and a pole back into a backyard. And then so on when I was, 12 or 13. Some of this is probably not, legal in America nowadays as far as child labor laws and stuff, but just kind of how things went for a lot of people back in the day. But I started, working on pools with my dad in the summertime. And there's my summer of fifth grade. I did my first pool prep. A lot of people know what that is, and some people might not. Most of the builders and, construction guys know what pool prepping is. And I did that. And I worked every summer since my fifth grade summer, all the way until I started working full time when I was in high school. I used to, leave school early and, go work on pools while my friends were still, taking classes. And, so after lunch every day, I'd go and work on pools and so on and so on. And basically worked in every phase of the construction industry and pool construction my entire life, from working with the plumbing crews. When I was 15, I was working on the steel crews. I'll never forget that because I have scars from when I was 15 on my legs and arms from doing that work. I actually remember throwing my back out when I was 15, right? I got my driver's license, and kind of remember those type of things that happened. So it's funny because I did so much of that at such a young age. So by the time I was like 22 or 21, which is a lot of the guys that we hire now, they have to be 21 to be able to be insured, at a decent rate. When they're younger than that, it's just hard to get, cheap insurance or affordable insurance. And these guys start doing it when they're 22, 23, 25. And and I was so much further along than them. And it's been a learning experience trying to hire guys like that to, and trying to understand how hard, I know how hard the work is, but, it was different for me then. But that was basically where it all was, and went from, after high school and a little bit of college, that I went to college for a few years, and I came home and started working for my dad again. And I always wanted to work for my dad and build pools. There's actually my mom had showed me a drawing that I did. It was at a crayon when I was a kid, and it was me drawing a pool at a crayon, and it said, "Daddy, I'm gonna build this one day." And she said, I don't know where she has a picture of it or somewhere, but here it is later. We're designing award-winning pools and all that stuff. And my dad was the same thing. He designed pools, he built them, and was considered as one of the better designers in South Florida. Back then pools were there's only so much you would design, but so I grew up working on some, we're definitely a production builder. We'd build a decent amount of pools a year. not the biggest, one in the one out there. There's have tons of competitors of mine that are way bigger than us. But for a lot of my friends and I know throughout the country, I would build a lot more pools than they do. But we still, with that being said, may have some small 15 by 30 foot pools. And then, even when I was a kid, building pools that are in excess of 70 and 80, feet long, and waterfalls. And mostly back in the day when I was a kid, there were big grotto waterfall pools and things like that. That was the big pools. And now everything's modern. So it's all straight edge and things like that. And who can design the coolest features and stuff like that. So kind of had a background, and our company was definitely known for, doing some custom stuff. And, so got thrown into that a lot as a kid, but I mean, pretty much worked through it all.
If you had to put a date time stamp on that, Erik, like when you first started, when was that?
So when I really first started working full time, I graduated high school early. I was so excited so I wanted to get right into doing pools that I decided to graduate early, which I kind of wish I didn't do that, because I kind of missed out on some of my high school stuff. But that was probably 1999. I graduated in 2000. And I remember I graduated early, which was the end of 99. And I was pretty much full time. And that was kind of when I actually said I wanted to go to college. Because like, oh God, I'm working labor work every day. And I was like, this is what the rest of my life's going to be like. And I had some friends going to college. And so I wanted to go to college and try to get a degree in construction. And once I did that, I realized how long it would take. And and I just, my dad was kind of always calling me, wanting me to come work, come back and go to work. And he didn't really go to school. So I felt that I'd do. So somewhere around 99 is when that kind of started, and I started working full time and, things like that. 2000, I think it was actually 2001 is when I first came back home and I started working full time.
Yeah, you got like 22 years in the game, going from like pool gopher, learning the ropes, just getting immersed in the industry, to like, now you're known throughout the area, as a premium luxury pool builder, custom pool builder. And, you've had the opportunity to work on some really incredible projects over the years. I mean, what drew you to wanting to help people build their ultimate backyard?
I always tell a lot of my clients and stuff like that basically, I've been around pools my whole entire life, basically born into this world, and, and here's swimming pools, and it's just, nonstop eat, live, and breathe swimming pools my whole life. Whether it's going to my grandfather's house or, you name it, it just is always around me. And I really believe that, we're all in business to, make money and have a family and support your family. But for me, just making money isn't enough. I needed to do things that kept me excited, and, designing and building pools that are really cool, and always trying to do something different. Because when you grow up in this, back in the day, everything was like, template pools, and you had a box of templates and you draw those in by hand. And, and a lot of the pools were all very similar, especially in Florida, the cookie cutter, production, developed pools that are built out here. It just is constant same thing. And that drove me crazy. I couldn't do that. Like we have pools, basic rectangles all the time, and which are still very classic and cool looking. But for me, like if I'm drawing the pool or something, even if it's a small pool, we have to have something on it that's different, that I could draw a pool and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And it just I won't have that, like, that less special feeling inside, unless it's got something that's different, or it's a little different for me. And that's what kind of really keeps me going and makes me love what I do, is that I want to try to do things that are different, educate myself to like have the ability to be able to, do those things. And that's a big part of what, makes me want to, the crazy side of me that wants to do the custom stuff, because custom stuff's not easy. It is hard. I would tell most pool builders, stick to basic stuff, because it's easier to make money doing that, and it's easier to build them. You're not going to have all the headache
That's not the stuff that's getting you eyeballs on you, though, Eric. I mean, the stuff getting you eyeballs is the custom stuff, the stuff that you pick up for awards. I mean, bring in the wow factor. You know, the pool construction industry has changed since those first days, 70 years ago when your company first began building. And, some things have stayed the same, but, building a pool in particular was a huge symbol of validation in America. Think about that. Providing that kind of luxury for the family meant that you had made it. Do you think that holds true in Florida today?
100%. I mean, I go in these neighborhoods and do these pools, and it's like they're literally like, oh, I got to do this one better than that guy, and then it is a big statement, especially for, I think it's definitely even bigger with the younger people or people have families, and it's like their kids are going over to the neighbor's house or they're having a party, and they're so excited to have their kids party at their house because their swimming pool in their backyard is so cool.
Right.
It definitely, that was a huge staple in the 50s and things like that coming out of World War II. My grandfather there's articles and books where he talked about that when he was in his 20s talking about pools. And if I showed you some of the first awards that we won in the 1960s for Pool World Mag, Pool something mag, I forget, I have the name of it, I can't think of it right now, but it was one of the original pool magazines. It was all over the United States, and they won awards. And some of the pool, you look at the pool and you'd be like, wait, you won an award because the pool had a curve in it, or something like. When we first started out, the pools were down here were, built they poured a floor and they built it out of concrete blocks. So the pool was really small and it was just a rectangle. So when he was able to, in his late 50s and 60s, start doing gunite shotcrete, when it first came into Florida, he was doing these radius pools and things like that, or, lima bean pool, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, they would win awards, and it would have like an elevation. It would go down to a seawall or a canal, which is really big in South Florida. There's lots of canals and things like that, and to the ocean. And, you'd have this, and that was like the award-winning, project. And so it's come so much different than that. But it was a status symbol. It really showed it. And I think it's even bigger now, and even past South Florida. You look at other small parts of the country that, people could build a pool, and it's like you have to be like the elite to own a pool. And now it's it's spread, and I think it's definitely a big symbol. I mean, God, every customer's like, they're like, oh, wait, he has that on his pool, like I got to do that. And I literally have people who have gone to other customers' houses and said, I want it bigger than his, and I want it this. And and it's not, you don't hear that all the time, but there's definitely that, and everyone's trying to one up each other in one sense or I think it's a big part of why architects and a lot of guys are really successful and are able to do things because the clients want the house that has cooler stuff than everyone else's, so same thing with the cars. And it's like the new car comes out, and everyone, people might have a car from this only 3 years.
Yeah.
They go sell their 3-year-old car because they got to have the new car and drive it around. And and it's the same thing with swimming pools, and especially with the people who have families and kids and they're using the pool all the time. And the pandemic just blew that up into like, God, it just took that, and it was like steroids. It's like here it is, you had a fire that was just burning for years, and pandemic came, and it just was like, boom, let's blow this up even more because everyone had to have the best pool and the best backyard. You know what I mean? So it's definitely true.
Guys who are really changing the game and elevating the industry down there. I mean, guys like Brian Van Bauer and Ryan Hughes, who are just building like crazy over the top luxury pools over there and really like setting a new level of expectation with homeowners' minds about what a backyard of that magnitude constitutes. I mean, really, the pool industry has changed so much since those first days, where we were having those doughboy pools in the backyard. And for homeowners in particular, building a pool has been a lifelong dream for some of these people, most of these people. Some of them have been saving and thinking about it for years. Pool builders are in a unique position to make or break that dream. How does your firm go about helping the customer articulate their vision for their ideal backyard?
Yeah, 100%. And you're so true. And it's even emphasized more, especially in South Florida, because, most of the South Florida is in all of Florida, but South Florida in generally where I live is, big because of so many of the people from the Northeast come here. And, and if you were to look at stats, I mean, it's blowing up a lot more, but, Northeast, most people are going to have a vinyl liner pool, and you have to be doing pretty well to be even able to have a vinyl liner pool in your backyard. So it's a massive luxury in those areas where it's massive populations of people in New York or Boston or Philly or you name it, anywhere in that Northeast corridor. And and so they all have this, somebody want to move to South Florida or Florida, and it's like everyone's got a pool. So it's like as soon as you move down here, boom, you get a swimming pool. You're doing better than everyone else already, and you already have this status and stuff like that, and it plays right into it. It's one of the reasons so many people move here, because hey, they want to have the big yard, and the schools are worse down here. So it's like they literally like take a hit by moving their kids down here to a worse school system than what is up in New York, or some of these areas that have really good school systems, just so that they can have the yard and have the nice things and have the nice back the nicer house with the, sometimes that's not even a bigger yard, but I mean, but they could have the pool and all that stuff. And, sometimes what they could build with what it costs to build a concrete pool up there, it's half the price or less than half the price down here to build it. So it's like they come down here and it's like they're getting everything that they want, you know what I mean? And for way less. So it's, it's a dream for people, to come down here and be able to do this stuff. And I believe the swimming pool is a big part of it.
A reason why a large percentage of people move is simply because the quality of life for your family is increased. And I think that, as people become of the child rearing age and they want to raise their kids in a better environment and they want them to have a better experience than they had growing up, that a lot of people are choosing to move to places like Texas and Florida, where they can have a little acreage and maybe build a swimming pool and maybe provide a better experience for their kids growing up than the one that they knew growing up.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's some, I mean, we always used to think that, people would retire in Florida and things like that. And, and that's what it is. And it's just, there's always people who are younger than moving down here once they get to a point where they can, but it's gotten to be so much more bigger, because now it's like, hey, you don't have to have a place to work at home. You can, or a place to actually go to work. You can, live down here and work from your computer and, or whatever it may be. And so it's just the amount of young down with their families is so much greater than what it ever used to be. And, they want that whole experience that you just said. Totally agree.
Well, how folks use their backyard has certainly changed over the years. I mean, the pandemic reignited the yearning to spend time with family in the home, and utilizing that outdoor living area suddenly became important again, because we couldn't travel. I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of multifunctional spaces that incorporate outdoor dining, outdoor kitchens, outdoor entertainment areas, conversational fire pits into the backyard plan. It's become so much more than just building a pool, you say?
Percent. I mean, I have a massive family. I have 6 brothers and sisters. I have 1 sister, and then there's 6 boys. I'm the oldest, and then my youngest brothers are 27. But because of that, and we're all similarly close to age, I hang out with my 27-year-old brother all the time, and you know what I mean. But all of our friends are similar age and close to age, so there's just this massive amount of friends when you go from my friends all the way to my brother's friends, and it really it really kind of, we see so much stuff that kind of comes to us, from that web of people, and I've learned so much, the way that the people do things, in their backyard. And also I have a friend, and they're building a new construction house, because that's such a big thing down here. I'm sure it is everywhere. There's tons of development, and they build these homes, 900 homes, and they squeeze all the homes in. So, and I'll see people, and they might buy their home, they might not have the money for the pool, and they'll want their backyard to be nice. They'll put a summer kitchen in, or small barbecue. They'll have it landscaped. They'll extend their pavers or their decking, and they'll put patio furniture. And I'll literally come over, and everyone will be saying, "Oh man, you did such a nice job back here." And I'll literally say, "You watch a couple of years, you're gonna rip all this out. All that money you spent is gonna be gone. You're gonna put a pool in." and almost every single time they do it. But it's just such a huge desire for people, especially young people who are just moved into their first home, and they want to have that outdoor space to hang out. So they can't afford a pool, but they'll literally spend a bunch of money and to make it nice and end up ripping it all out to build a pool. I can't tell you, we come across so many backyards that have already been done up with landscaping, and we got to tear it all apart. You know what I mean? And it shows that, hey, they're trying to get to having the backyard to whatever level they can. So now they can afford a small backyard, and then they rip it all out to build something bigger. And then it goes to the point where they, if they lived in the house long enough, they rip that pool out and build a bigger pool. So it's constantly they're competing with themselves, inside themselves to have the nicer, outdoor experience. And it's definitely true, 100%.
Got your finger on the pulse kind of, about what's going on in South Florida. I mean, what features do you feel bring the most value?
I mean, they're and I think it definitely is pretty continuous throughout the country, the things that are popular. Florida definitely is special in its own right. They have some of the strictest building codes in the country. If you were to you asked if you've ever taken a Brian Van Bauer class. I've known him for a long time, but if you ever take one of his classes, some of the things they'll joke about is the codes in Florida. And they do have, there's so many families and there's so many people that move here that they have the Florida building code. They don't go off international building code. And it's very, and there's very strict things that I would tell people that I have to do in Florida. People are like, are you serious? And a lot of it's, some of the things started in Florida and spread it out. If you want to go into barrier codes and main drains and things like that. And they started in Florida and they spread everywhere. And so some things, when you get to some of the luxury stuff, it's harder to do everything. And especially South Florida, it's an island in a sense, and it's flat. So you're limited to certain things that you can do. You know what I mean? That maybe you can have nicer, features and, different things that are done, and the pool styles are different. But, obviously the biggest thing, in my opinion, that every pool is going to have, whether it's a small pool or a big pool, is going to be that chow lounging Baja shelf, as they call it on the West Coast, or sun shelf. Those are just constantly it's like, I tell people, like, if they don't want to do it, I'm like, you're losing value on your house if you don't do that, because anyone that buys their house, if all your neighbors have it and you don't, they might not buy your house because it doesn't have a sun shelf. I mean, it's just, it's a thing that's common everywhere, but it's such a big thing because it's like, whether it's the adults lounging in it or it's the kids playing on it. I didn't realize how important they were. I knew it from my business perspective, but until I had my kids are 5 and 2, but until I started seeing them actually in my own pool on my sun shelf, I was just like, wow, it is such a big pivotal thing. But my son is just, he's even 5, and it just still is such a part of, he jumps off of it. And it also, like, when your kids are doing swimming lessons, it is huge. It creates such an easier space for them to learn how to swim, whether it's, they could swim up to it and, hang off of it. They can kick their feet and then they could dunk their head under the water, where if you're holding onto a coping edge, it's a little different than putting your head underwater because you're kind of holding on to something higher. So, I mean, it's such an easy thing for me to sell to people, because of the kid factor too. And then you throw in, like, hey, you can lounge on it with your wife and your adults and stuff like that. And then the next biggest thing is making sure that's a proper size, because I gotta see, you see it all over the place, especially when you're talking about the big pool states, Texas, Florida, Arizona, California. The companies will just throw these little small 9x9s in there or something like that, and it's not functional. You need to have something that's 12x6, 12x7, and that's where you start out at. So you can have your section for your ledge loungers or your chairs, and a section for the kids and the entry to get in and out of the pool. And so it's, but that's the pivotal point. Every single pool has that. Now there's just so many water features, and how we use the water features. Obviously the rain curtains are just, blowing up, and, companies, like, there's so many companies on, but they, that make them. They're just so many different ways that people are using them to create, cool features and things like that. It's, those are kind of exciting.
Yeah, we did an interview with a really well-known West Coast outdoor landscaping and pool design company, Foxterra Design.
Hmm.
They had an amazing pool with this beautiful rain curtain that was on the cover of our last issue. These oversized tanning ledges with ledge loungers are becoming enormously popular. Design and aesthetics are always important, particularly for discerning homeowners in South Florida who put a premium on that outdoor living experience. And I see some gorgeous examples of mosaic glass tile in your pool projects that incorporate lit loungers, things like that. You did this interview with Pebble Tech that really caught my eye. It was a fantastic project, Erik. I mean, could we talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And it's what, it's funny about that. And I got to give a little credit on that project, but that project came to me from a few different people. One, Ryan Hughes actually recommended him. He's a friend of mine, and I met him in Genesis, and local Florida guy. We have a similar background and stuff like that, and but anyways, he this girl's hit him up on Instagram, and the homeowner, and he's like, I don't work down there, and he's like call Ike and da 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 da. And so he kind of recommended me on that project. And then when we went out there, she's like, oh, you've actually, and she saw the name of the company, she's like, oh, I know I know this person, and you did their pool, and your business partner was already out here, and he didn't want to take the project on. And I was like, yeah, he needed to send me out here. But yeah, that pool was actually a funny story because she had hired it's unfortunate down here, but she hired an unlicensed pool builder. It was a guy as a general contractor, and he's they just do everything down here. It's really bad. And then they were remodeling her pool, and they literally had built the pool. They were doing it so bad, and they had ordered all this expensive Italian tile, and and they botched that, and they were putting things into the pool that were actually illegal that could have probably actually harmed our kids. They were putting water features that were made for fountains into our pool that had 115, 110 volt outlets that you'd plug in. It just, everything was so illegal and done the wrong way. And and it was sad when I came out there and showed her this stuff. She started crying, you know what I mean? But so we took the project over, we demoed everything, started the whole thing all over again. And, I redesigned it. And as soon as she saw the design, she was just like, oh my God, yes, please. And we swayed her to using, there's a light streams tile. And I had talked to David Knox, and he basically said, hey, I have tile that's an all iridescent, and and so we kind of came with that. And he doesn't do a lot of that. Most of the stuff is multi-iridescent, and so we did this full iridescent tile from them. And and I had Jimmy Smith shoot. I've known Jimmy for a long time. He's been shooting my pools for years now, but he shot the pool, and we got this cool photo that really emphasized the full iridescent tile on the sun shelf. And that picture, so many other ones that we have with the the sun shelf tile, shallow lounging area tiled like that, with a very prominent iridescent tile. It's just, the customers they just love it. But some people don't like iridescent tile, and especially nowadays they want clean looks and smooth tile that doesn't have a lot of bling to it. But more people love iridescent than not. It's just people want that flashy jewelry type of.
If you saw that photo that Jimmy took of that pool at night, I mean, how could you not want it?
Yeah, and she's that lady. I love that customer. She's so great, but she's a single mom, and she's got a lot going on. She has her own business, and so when we came to shoot the pool, she really hadn't been maintaining the backyard, and she had these massive trees that she actually cut down. Now, thank God we got the shots, because when we were there, they were blooming all these flowers. But the problem is the flowers would go all over the deck and ruin the deck and stain it. When we actually got to the pool to shoot it, there were stains everywhere, all over brand new deck. There was stuff all over the place, and Jimmy and us, we had to clean everything up. And part of the shot was to get the pool and kind of drowned out some of the stuff in the background, so you didn't see some of the things that were going on. And it actually worked out perfect, and it really emphasized the pool. And we kind of tried to do this full iridescent tile wall. And then we designed a bigger wall that contrasted that with a stack stone that we were matching, that was on the house. And so we really were trying to, our whole thing is which most, people in design want to do, that is, bring, elements from the house into the backyard. And so we tried to do that with our pool, and it really worked out well, and offset some shear descents, the LED shear descents. And she actually has that pool's pretty cool. She's got speakers in the water. She does a lot of swimming a lot of laps and swimming in the pool. It's a big, I think the pool's 65 feet long or something like that. So she does a lot of laps in there, and she has music that she can kind of hear as she's swimming. And, so it's definitely a cool project. And I still have that. We've done so many pools, but I have that pool still to this day as on my phone, as my screensaver type thing on my phone. And it's been there for the last few years. And I have other projects that are probably cooler than that one, and that picture and that shot with the iridescent tile, it's
I know.
cool.
It's just the first time I ever came across your company, and I said, wow, that's a really kick-ass pool. I wonder who built that. And that's when I stumbled across Ike's Carters, and where you guys got drawn to my radar. But being in the business for 70 years, you guys know a thing or two about making those kind of dreams come true for homeowners. What was that process like for your company to kind of become a market leader in your area?
So the story is, there's a lot to it. I'll try to keep it short. And
give me the Cliff Notes version, because we got a short podcast.
Yeah, 100%. So a family business in 3 generations, and anyone who's I know you've interviewed other people. Lee Russell is a friend of mine, and some other guys that have been around. But family business is even Ryan Hughes knows this, and sometimes a family business isn't always the easiest thing to work in. And so there was a lot of different, which says a lot about our company, is there was a lot of different things that kind of happened when my grandfather and my dad didn't meet eye to eye. My dad actually, in 1993, he left my grandfather and started his own company. And then that was the company I grew up in. And my dad unfortunately passed away. My grandfather actually passed away in 1999 of cancer. He had prostate cancer. And they tried to sell the company back to my dad. And, they couldn't make the deal work. And so he ended up selling it to the 3 or 4 of the managers that were part of the company. And they were all guys that used to work under my dad. One is my business partner now. And long story short, my dad's company grew, and he grew it and really took what he did over at Ike's Carter Pools and made his company, Pools by Ike Jr., really, special. It was actually bigger than my grandfather's company. My dad ended up passing away in 2011. He was, 58, and he had colon cancer, and it, eventually caught up to him. And so I was running a company, and that was during the recession and all that stuff. So it was a really hard time, and hard times make you stronger, because everything that I am today is because of everything that I went through back then. And basically the results was that, we're starting to build these really cool pools and kind of, really get ourselves established again, coming out of the recession, when we had, every company had financial issues. If you didn't have financial issues in 2008 and beyond, then, you must have had some kind of money coming from else. Right. But it basically, as we're really establishing ourselves and really building some really cool projects again, and I was a small little company. We had downsized everything. And, I was on the Florida Swimming Pool Association's, local chapter board for Broward County, which is, the county where Fort Lauderdale is, and, just north of Miami-Dade. And basically, Gary Kaplan, who's my business partner and who actually took my dad's position. My dad trained him when he left Ike's Carter Pools. He was on the board too. And, we were always joking and talking. And I was one day, it was a dream to, have that company back and have everything, that turmoil of my dad and my grandfather pushed to the side, and and have it as one company. And I just thought one day that I would end up buying them out when they retired, because they were older than me. And and we were just talking, and we have a massive service company. We build, design, and maintain pools. And I mean, back in the 60s, we had 800 pools on service, 1,300 pools on service. So it's been a big part of what we do, is servicing the pools too. And so they had a very strong service background, and their building background was kind of minimal. They're building pools, and nice ones. They just were not at the level that we were, because when my dad left, that kind of came with him. He was that man at the company, the designer, the license holder, and building all the pools. And they wanted to be wanted to get back into that. They wanted to grow their business, and I wanted to have something that had some more stability than just straight up construction, because I went through that in 2008. And if you were in construction or luxury construction, you felt it, because people don't need swimming pools to live.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you don't need a swimming pool to live. And if when it gets hard, if ever got back to that, it's our industry is the one that feels it, unfortunately. So I
Well,
wanted
it
to,
came
you know,
back in a big way, Eric. I mean, we had the pandemic, and then the entire process kind of reset itself from a 180 from what 2008 was. I mean, the explosion and unprecedented demand that we've seen has some companies, sold out past 2023 with a waiting list of folks on a backlog waiting in queue. I mean, what have things been like, for your company? What's the current lead time?
Yeah, and we definitely have, our lead time has gotten smaller. We worked around it, but I think at one point we were, I would say, a little bit over 6 months out. And when we say 6 months out, meaning once you get your permit, you'd have to wait 6 months for us to actually start the pool. Some people would say our lead times a year or 2 years, and that's like from the day of your contract. We always try to, hey, this is from the day we get your permit, then you got to wait for the dig date. So we're down now. I think we have stuff scheduled into I want to say late November, maybe right now. So we're about 3 months out.
That's about average.
It's getting better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially for companies like us. But it's our sales.
You're in a hot market, buddy. I mean, Orlando area. Your company your state in particular is a hot market for pools. The city, Orlando, was ranked number 4 on the list of U.S. cities with the highest percentage of residential pools in the country. That was a survey conducted by Lending Tree, and they determined that over 25.9% of homes in the Orlando area have a swimming pool. Traditionally, real estate agents across the board, whether they would say it depends on the buyer or the market, but in places like Miami, Tampa, Orlando, where more than like 1 in 4 folks own a swimming pool, clearly buyers expect one to be in the backyard. Given that pools are taking longer to build these days and materials are costing more, do you think homeowners in South Florida are going to begin to put a bigger premium on homes that already come with a pool?
Yeah, and I think that we've already seen it. I mean, I've had clients that, for whatever reason, they sold their house because how much they can get out of it, or I built a pool, and I mean, I've won, pretty much every award you can submit, or every award that I submitted, we won it for. And I had a client, he had the pool for a year, and he sold it, and over 300, maybe close to 400,000 in his backyard, which is a tremendous amount for South Florida. South Florida is one of the cheaper places to build a swimming pool, which is has changed during the last year or two. But he sold his house, and people in the neighborhood were like they couldn't believe how much he sold the house for. And it's because he had everything. He had the pool, it was amazing backyard, and he had it all, you name it, it was back. And so that just set a precedence for them. People were like, we had people that they had contracts, and we were starting to build the pool, and it was like, because they were getting a new pool, or they're having a new pool, it was like almost like a bidding war. So it's like, it's definitely a huge thing, and you can see it. My wife's in she's not a real estate agent, but she's in title sales and deals with real estate agents all the time, and there's definitely a different value when you have a pool compared to not having a pool. So
what we saw in 2008, Eric, was that a large percentage of new pool construction was tied to new home construction. And whether you believe it or not that we're in a recession, folks are talking about rising mortgage rates, increasing inflation, that we may have slipped into a bear market. We're down a few quarters in this country, and the Fed has not acknowledged that we're in a recession. But what's your gut feeling tell you, personally, based on your experience and what you saw in 2008 and what you're seeing now? What do you see going on in the market?
Yeah, say South Florida is probably the strongest market in Florida. It just is population wise. There's 9 million people, and you could drive an hour and there's 9 million people. So sort of like Long Island, but spread out. So in a sense, South Florida, we've always joked around or said in South Florida that, when a country goes into a recession, that sometimes Florida, especially South Florida and certain markets in Florida, don't feel it as much because there's so many people that they don't need people to necessarily be moving here to keep business moving. And, but we definitely have seen, our sales and leads fell off probably, I think it was like March or something like that, or it started slowing down. But for us, I was like, thank God, you know what I mean? And I don't
breathe.
Yeah, I don't want the sales to stop. Don't ever take that. Very blessed to have the sales and the business, even though it's been a complete disaster, and I would give it all back, to be honest, because it just hasn't been, great for a lot of companies, in my opinion, with what it costs to build a pool and, and all those things, which is a whole different podcast. But, at the end of the day, I we still have had, enough sales where it's like, I could take these sales that I've had for the last 6 months and I would be thrilled. Before the pandemic, me and my business partner would high five each other if we were having sales like this, because it was still really good. So, even this month is actually, I think, was a little, so we had a really good month last month, and this month's been, I think we might only sell 2 pools this month, where last month we maybe sold 4 or 5, but the pools are so much more, where it's like, hey, you could build a pool for 45,000 as a starting point, which is very, very cheap, basic pool 3 years ago. And now that pool, like, we can't touch the pools unless they're 65,000. And, this is South Florida again. It starts at a lower price, and for, just everything's super competitive. But, now it's like pretty much all of our pools are, most of the pools we sell are 140, 150,000 and up, where before our average medium pool maybe it was like 90,000, or 80, or maybe 80,000 or something like that. So, now we don't have to sell as many pools to still have the revenue that we need, and which is nice. But we definitely have felt it. I mean, the home sales have definitely slowed down.
Yeah.
But there's people. This is how I always put a judgment on things. And when you talk about experience and what I really believe, when I see developers still developing, and when I see like these big companies that have tons of researchers and invest tons of money and millions of dollars, and they go after, they lobby the government to open up land, because South Florida, it's so built up, there's not a lot of space to build until you get into Palm Beach County, or Palm Beach, or which is north of Boca Raton and north. There's a little bit more land, but they literally are still going into the these government agencies and lobbying. They're still coming up with land to open up big neighborhoods, and as long as that keeps happening, you're still going to see business coming through. And again, we're in South Florida. It takes a lot for the for those things to hit in these areas, because there is so many people, and pools are so popular, that boat sales have been a major thing, is similar to pool sales. The boat industry or RV industry, those industries have been just booming like crazy, like ours has. And they're still selling boats down here, I promise you. I mean, it's and so it's all slowed down, but it hasn't stopped.
Let's switch gears a minute, Erik, because I really don't want to get into a whole thing about stocks and the market and this and that. I'd be remiss if I had you on the show and all I did was jaw with you about stocks and real estate. I saw the photos Jimmy Smith took of your recent pool projects, complete eye candy. We'll be highlighting some of those in an upcoming issue of Pool Magazine. I mean, what have been some of your favorite recent projects to work on as a builder? Surely, you got a couple of those projects stand out in your mind and have made your highlight reel. I'd love it if you could share 1 or 2 of those with us.
Yeah. So he was just here actually. I don't get him here a lot in the summertime. I'm kind of his winter customer, which I'm totally fine with, and because he gets so busy in the summer. But sometimes I have to have him here because I got pools I need him to shoot. But he was just here right after Labor Day. Literally flew in, I think, the day, like that Monday after Labor, Tuesday or Monday or whatever it was. And I had 5 projects I needed him to shoot, and 3 of them were just big, some of the nicest ones we've done to date. And and those ones are definitely really exciting. I just got one of the edits back on one of them, and she's editing the photos right now on some of those, and they are just it's some of them, they're just, and you get these customers that are, it just has everything they want, every single thing in the pool. And it's like he walks in the backyard and he's like, I don't even know where to start shooting, because there's so many different things going on. Cool. And we've had a few like that, and these other ones are just like, and I end up with, they send me the photos, and a lot of times it sends me 20 photos or 18, 16 photos. He sent me 45 and 50 photos on 2 of these jobs, and I was trying to pick through them. It was hard to pick through them. Usually I never pick more than 15 photos with Jimmy, or 8, you know what I mean? And the 2 projects, I got 30 and 35 photos they edited, because they were just, I couldn't not have some of the shots, you know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, well, here's a shot that was a close up, and then they pull back, and it's like, well, now when they pull back on the same shot, you see like 5 more things in the pool that are important. So it's like, even the editor was calling me. She's like, you sure you want all these? And she's like, and then she was like, as she's looking, she's like, no, you need all these. You're totally right. I've never done that before on a pool. We've had a couple that we had a lot, but you know, to have 30 photos of a pool that we edited was, you know, a lot. And when you see the photos, you know, you're like, okay, yeah, this may obviously you definitely needed that. And they're really cool. And we just, I love having, when I'm able to get a client, like the clients like these, because they just, some of the good ones, and one or two, one of them is a repeat client, and he just said, you're so, just you come up with whatever it is. I'm not even telling you what I want. Just you do it. And that we blew him away. He just literally, and every single thing that he was doing, he kept asking for my advice. And when they do that it really turns out special. And, and when they trust us and they try to take over things and try to make it look horrible or clash materials, and they stick to what we're trying to, and get our influence on it. And that's cool. And that's something that I've seen develop as we keep getting, keep growing in the industry, is that the clients really are, trusting us even more, and then the projects just, and then if they have the budget, it just really turns out to be special. And we have a few of those, and we've got several of them that we're building or in the process of building. So it's been cool. And that's probably been the coolest thing, beyond the amount of, revenue and all that that's come out of the pandemic, is that we're getting these really cool projects and these clients that are just really trusting us to, do things. And we'll see some of these, pools coming out here. I think I posted a picture of on my story on Instagram, a snap of one of them. But we'll see some of those pictures coming out, and definitely can feel free. I'll definitely share them with you. But it's been cool. I mean, every single one of those pools has a rain curtain. Let's just say it like that. Some of them have multiple rain curtains, and and it just is. It's just part of, it's just part of, and what can we do with those features, and how can we, here it is, we do one, and okay, now the next one, let's try to do something even cooler with it. And it's, the only thing about it is you got to build it, and that's a, challenge. And luckily, like when I design the stuff, I'm in my head, I'm saying I'm going to build it like this, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I work with a multitude of different consultants, when I have big jobs like that I'll go to and have them help me with the plans. And a lot of it is me telling them, hey, this is how I want to do it. And then they give me their feedback from engineer, different things. And, but it's been really cool. And, and it's just exciting to be able to try to do different things. And some of these you realize, probably shouldn't have did that, maybe, or let's do it this way, next time, or whatever, to, make sure that it's, done. And that's part of building pools, and part of the experiences.
Who's your tile guy, Erik?
My tile guy. So I have a lot of the crews that we work with in South Florida. We've brought them on, and we kind of work with them. And then I use the knowledge and the experience that I've learned from Genesis, or being in Tributary, or Water Shapes, and then all the friends and people that I have. And I try to teach those guys that, and say, this is how, when several years ago, like my tile guys didn't even know what waterproofing was, like 4 or 5 years ago, like they didn't know what waterproofing was. And so we teached every guy how to do it. And I've been through so many tile guys over the year. We had a tile guy work for us for 20 years. And then in a recession, he moved back to Brazil, and we lost him. But, so I've built some new ones, and they're really good. I mean, they're not cheap, I'll tell you that much, but, they're, and two of the guys that I have pretty much work directly for me, and really don't have enough time to do anything for anyone else. And God knows I've tried to get, Ray and Mosaicist on some jobs, but it's just a matter of getting the client with the budget that wants to do an all tile pool. And so he actually did a little Tesla. I had a customer that had so much Tesla stock, and he built a pool with the Tesla stock, and had to have the Tesla logo on his pool. And of course I went right to Ray, and he did me a favor, made it. And, and so that's the only project I have so far. But, we definitely have some guys that, and we work with them. They call me every time we're on a job and there's difficult tile or things like that, and we go over it to make sure do it the right way. Or if if I have questions and I call the, people that I have relationships with, whether it's guys from Lanada Bay or whatever manufacturer it may be, and make sure that we're doing things the right way.
Shout out to Lanada Bay. Shout out to Ray. We've had him on the show before. Mosaic is definitely a great one. Basically, Erik, one of the unique pleasures I have of doing this podcast is I get to talk about something I love, which is swimming pools, with other folks who are passionate about the same things that I am. It's always nice to chat with folks who love this industry and we're out there doing great things. I appreciate you taking the time to check in with us today and talk shop, man. Thanks so much for spending the time with us.
No problem. Appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
That's all the time we have today. To learn more about Ike's Carter Pools, click the link in the podcast. You've been listening to Pool Magazine, where we engage in meaningful discussions like the one you just heard with thought leaders from around the pool and spa industry. Click the like button, follow, and make sure to subscribe to get the print issue of Pool Magazine and stay up to date with the latest pool news.
You've just been listening to Pool Magazine Podcast. Today's episode was proudly sponsored by the new Ledge Lounger Autograph Collection, which features a robust catalog of new chaise lounges, chairs, headrest pillows, and side tables. The Autograph Collection is a sophisticated, reimagined look for contemporary in-pool and outdoor living furniture. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast.